Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Today's show is all about the mindset. How can and should educators shift their mindset as they move to teaching online? How can they psych themselves up for what may feel like an overwhelming ask? In terms of teachers, learn the system, learn it early, get on, practice it. Use YouTube videos to learn how to do things. Most of the companies that have online teaching platforms also have all kinds of tutorials on YouTube. Use them. It'll be normal for you to feel a little uncomfortable at first, but so what? Let nervous become normal and move forward. I challenge you, if you want to get better at teaching online, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the importance of the so-called 10,000 hours. If you're going to be good at anything, you got to keep working on it and doing it. Repetition, repetition, repetition. I have a background in athletics. So one of the things we do in athletics is way before the game starts, as a defenseman, I was assigned to cover an offensive player. And I would watch film all week on that person. I would learn their tendencies. And then I would sit down and I would literally close my eyes and I would meditate on what's it going to be like in a game. And I would do different scenarios like a simulator. You know, a young man who is in the process of becoming a NASCAR driver. And anytime I would go over to visit his dad, I'd see him in front of the simulator. It is actually a NASCAR experience for him that is running virtually. And it's how NASCAR drivers practice. That's how pilots practice. I have a friend who flies for FedEx. And anytime he's going to be learning a new plane, he practices in a simulator. I want you to think about that as an online teacher. I want you to simulate each aspect of the lesson plan that you have. The class is only as good as you, the professor, and the energy you bring to the class. So if you want to have a good online experience for your students, it's going to be on you. Teaching is theater. And many of you out there have done theater. How would you prepare for a performance? When you come to the class, you have to set the standard, the energy that you bring to the class. You got to come with the right attitude. Check your attitude. What are you thinking about this? If you're going into this as woe is me, that's what the student's probably going to see. So your attitude equals your altitude. So what's your attitude? Is it going to be positive going into this, or you hate technology and you dread technology? That comes across when you get online. So I think it's really important that you check yourself before you get online. Sometimes I'll even ask the students at the beginning of the class, what do you want out of this class? Tell me, are you looking for an A, B, C, D? What do you want out of this class? If you're the educator and your expectation is that everybody be a B plus A student, and you're dealing with somebody who just wants to get a C, graduate, and move on, then you're going to be knocking yourself out. So I think it's really important that you get on a expectation that's in agreement with what the student expects. Ask them, literally ask them in the class. Send me an email, tell me what you want for a final result for this class. And if you have students that you see are more invested in this class, more invested in getting a higher grade, then pour yourself into the other people. That's where you want to invest your time. That's where you're going to get a good return on investment. But there are other students that do not want to put that much time in, and you should not be taking on guilt or shame because they're not doing better in the class. They may not want to do better than a C in the class or a D in the class, which is a passing grade in many institutions, and graduate. That is a really important thing to figure out in your head so that you can survive this mentally. That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Mistakes, they're going to happen. That's what today's show is about. What are the biggest mistakes I've seen teachers new to virtual teaching make, and what tips can I share to avoid them? Let's talk about mistakes. This is very much for students like getting a new car. I got a new car not that long ago. It's a secondhand car, but it's new to me. It took me a long time to feel comfortable with that car now feels like my car. So help them work through that. Help them to know that different things are available to them online. Give time for students to ask questions, not just about the course content, but also the software you're using to deliver the content. What are the biggest mistakes that you see teachers make when it comes to teaching online? I was an education major as an undergrad, and I had to learn how to do lesson plans. You need to have a lesson plan. And if you as an educator are teaching live or online and you don't have a lesson plan, you're planning to fail. As I like to say, success and failure are both planned events. So what are you planning to do in your class? Do you have a lesson plan where it's all written out, an outline of what you're going to do? Because if you don't plan to succeed, you're planning to fail. So get that lesson plan together way in advance of your class and run the class through your mind before you get online. Common mistakes is people don't think about the background. Where are you sitting or standing when you teach? Set up your camera so you can actually stand. Most of us, when we teach live, we're standing. At least that's what I do. As I'm making this podcast today, I'm in my office and I'm walking around as though I were teaching live in a classroom. Why not do the same thing online? What's in the background? Do you have good lighting? Make sure that your room is properly lit. You can invest in some online lighting, but you can also probably jerry-rig some things in your house and just come up with a well-lit room. Take a look at the lighting before you go live to see what it looks like. Take a look at the background before you go live. You can go on early and you can record a literally 30-second portion, record it, and then play it back and see what it looks like, and then make changes before the class actually starts. What are the biggest mistakes that you see teachers make when it comes to teaching online? They think all of it needs to be done in a live session. Front load your content. Produce the content that the students need to know, whether it be in audio, PowerPoint, video. It needs to be a dynamic class. Think about teaching as a dynamic process. It's theater. You just now need to create a theater performance online. You can imagine going to a theater. One person sits in a chair in the middle of the stage by themselves and starts a monologue. Now that can work in some situations, but if you have 15 classes to cover before the semester is over, and you're going to provide the same pedagogy sitting on a seat and delivering and a monologue and a, without very little change in tone of voice, that's not going to work. One of the other mistakes, they don't get breaks. I can't work for 90 minutes without taking a break. I typically work for 30 minutes at home and then I go for a short walk. In an online class, I make sure we take about a 10-minute break for people to do whatever they want to do, but just take a break. It's healthy to do that. It's healthy for you. It's healthy for your students. Watch a recording of one of your classes so you can see what you're actually doing, because you may think you're bringing energy to the class, but if you actually watch yourself online, you will see whether you are or not. Watch how you're interacting with the students. Are you being positive? That is so important to make sure this is a positive experience. Elicit feedback from the students, not at the end of the course, maybe halfway through. Ask them what they'd like to do more of. Ask them for suggestions of activities they'd like to do. Ask them for things that worked well in their other online classes that they would suggest in this course. That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Students. Today's show is all about the student. Are they ready for this transition too? What should educators expect from their students? What do teachers need to prepare for? What are the wackiest things I've seen on camera? Let's talk about students. If you are a college student, you want to make sure that you have your laptop checked. Make sure you have your computer plugged in. Make sure you have it charged. Camera on the laptop is working. Purchase a good headset with microphone that wraps around very close to your mouth. I would not depend on a microphone that you would use on an iPhone or Android. I'd get a good quality headphone that would plug into your computer. Dress professionally from the waist up where people are going to see you. Comb your hair, whatever you need to do to look like you're doing an interview, because you're going to be on camera in front of everybody. Now, there is a way for you just to turn your camera off. And if that's fine with your professor, I would do that. But I can tell you the system that I used to teach with has a sensor to tell if you are present and engaged at the computer. So you don't want to make the mistake of signing on and thinking, all right, I'm going to blow this off and go take a nap, get something to eat or watch a game or whatever it is. This is a 50-50 proposition. This is a dialect between I have to do my job and you have to do your job. You're going to get a much better grade on an online or live class if you're making regular contributions. So if the class is 90 minutes, you want to make sure in that 90 minutes you're asking a quality question, you're responding to a quality question, or you're doing a follow-up. But to sit there for 90 minutes and say nothing is crazy. What if I did this in the middle of my podcast? That was barely 5 seconds of me saying nothing. And it sounded weird, didn't it? Well, it's just as weird when you do that in a class. You have 90 minutes and you say nothing. If I'm the teacher, I'm going, something wrong. Something's wrong with that person. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of the students, and maybe after each class or once a week, I'm going to give them some feedback in the terms of their proactive grade. And I share that with them. I make a large percentage of the class, 25%, 30%, that proactive part, because my message to them is, I got to do my part and you got to do your part. And the students who are not doing well in that area, I will send them some feedback. I will ask to do a online office meeting with them and tell them what this is a concern with me. So while you're online, if you're doing work in a group, you can use Google Docs, Google Hangouts, you can use Zoom. Be sure that you learn the computer. Get onto the computer early. Check to make sure your volume is loud enough. The other thing is you want to make sure wherever you are sitting that it's quiet. Room that is well lit, because on the online system, you can pick up all the sounds in the background. So if somebody's cooking, somebody's listening to the radio, you can hear it all. So be sure that you're in a room that is away, isolated, and has got good lighting. You don't want to be in a room where you look like, you've been kidnapped by somebody. And often students don't realize that we can see just about everything in the background. So have it well lit, make sure there's nothing in the background that you wouldn't want anybody else to see. You just want to make sure you look professional as a student. Right now, your professor doesn't know you from Jack. They don't know anything about you. So first impressions are super important. We've all heard that before. I'm going to give you an example of a name that you all probably be very familiar. Several names. I do this with my students. So this is what you see go on the first day of class with me as a way of trying to make my students understand the importance of making first impressions. So if I say the name Hillary Clinton, there's an image that comes to your mind right now. If I say Donald Trump, there's an image that comes to your mind. Now, the question I ask my students, what comes to people's mind when they think of your name? The reality is that you are brand new to me and I don't know anything about you, and I'm going to be giving you a final grade. So it's incumbent upon you to establish some great images behind your name, i.e., early to class, assignments handed in on time, prepared for class, that is, does the reading and can participate in the class discussion without just saying things for the purpose of saying things. Because I can tell you as a college professor, it is clear when people are just talking to be talking. Some other things you can put behind your name is ask great questions. There's nothing more impressive to me than a great question coming from a student. So all these things go into establishing a great name for yourself and a great image when I think of you and your name. So these are really important things. Now, this is in the work situation, the internship. All these are examples where you're going to be making first impressions on people, and it's important. So you want a long-lasting first impression. Students often do not come to me when they're working on an assignment and having a difficulty until it is really bad and they need to be rescued from deep water that they can't swim in. The time to come see me is before it gets out of hand. I tell students that you got to look at your professor as the mechanic. The AAA, I have AAA, right? When you have AAA and you get in a problem, they come right to the rescue. That's how a college professor is. I can't help you if your car is running down the road 60 miles an hour and you're talking about, I'm having problems, I can't do this. You got to pull that bad boy off to the side, otherwise known as my office. Come see me. Let me know what the problem is. Let me look under the hood and figure it out. I have all kinds of experience finding sources that you think don't exist or you can't find. Whatever the scenario is, come see me. Give you another situation, which is very real. I deal with it all the time. You're in a group, doing a group assignment in your class, and you got somebody who decides they're not going to pull their weight. Come see me. I'm the manager. I'm the supervisor. I work on these problems all the time. And guess what? It is great experience for when you get out into the work world, because you will be doing group assignments and somebody, more often than not, is going to try to get out of doing what everybody's supposed to be doing. So go see the teacher. Don't wait until the situation gets out of control. When you are looking at your smartphone for an extended period of time in my class, and I don't know why, my assumption is probably going to be that you're texting, reading a text, emailing somebody, especially if I see the little fingers going 1,000 miles an hour. A message comes to me that what you're doing is more important to this class. You wouldn't want that message to come across to your college professor. You're waiting for some very important text, then just tell the professor for a class. You may see me checking my phone today because my mom is in the hospital and we're waiting for results on a really important test and I'm going to have to check the phone. Get it? No problem. Now, if you come to me 5 times and tell me that same story, then we got a problem. That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Technology. Let's get specific. What are the differences between the platforms? What are their advantages and disadvantages? How do you protect your classroom from digital bombing? I'm speaking to technology specialist Lisa Cohen. You do this job at Babson College, but you also have, is it 1 college student or 2 college students in your family?
I have 3 boys, 2 are in college, one's a senior and the other is a junior.
And they're both doing online classes as I speak?
They are. 2 of my boys use Zoom. We as Babson use WebEx.
What is the difference between Blackboard as a platform and Canvas? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each?
That Canvas, a lot of functionality that happens that Blackboard did not do. Canvas is very intuitive, easy to use, and especially from the user interface perspective.
What were some other ones that you remember reviewing and saying, wow, this could work as well?
We looked at Blackboard Ultra, but it was kind of half-baked. They were kind of developing as they were going along. The other one was Desire to Learn. But, for example, as we were piloting it, it took 10 clicks to do something where it was 1 or 2 clicks to do something in Canvas. Looking at those 3, so we had Canvas, Desire to Learn, and Blackboard Ultra that were doing a lot of comparing and a lot of piloting with testing and staying on top of both as far as what they had to offer.
So you used the term 2 clicks versus 10 clicks, which reminds me so much of what people say in digital marketing is the more clicks, the more friction, the less likely someone's going to purchase a product. And I'm hearing that this is very similar in online software. You want students to be able to get to whatever they need to with the least amount of clicks.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a big part of this, even from the faculty creation side of putting their content in the learning management system. They wanted it quick, easy, user-friendly, so they didn't really have to do 10 clicks to do something, but also they wanted it a very easy process as they were loading up the content for their courses. What we're finding and having 2 students in my house, as you know, that are using Zoom, a lot more privacy available from the WebEx side. So, for example, there's a lot of, they're calling it Zoom bombings right now, where people are hacking into Zoom because there's less privacy on a level unless it's set at the organization level. So a lot of colleges, you need to go in and start looking at, from the admin side, blocking and making these Zoom meetings private. Because right now, Zoom is open to public. People can find a Zoom meeting quickly by doing searches. From the WebEx side, there's also quick ways to lock a meeting room, or you're meeting with a student one-on-one even. There's a way very easily for WebEx to lock the meeting room and then kind of have a picture a door where if someone's waiting on the other side of the door, the faculty member gets notified. We're just finding that the security part is working really great from the WebEx side. Also, some of the reports that we're running, WebEx seems to be down less than Zoom. We're seeing a lot of stats that Zoom is going down much more than WebEx is.
What effect does the type of internet service you have, how does that interact with WebEx or Zoom?
Verizon, Comcast, any of those services seems to work fine. It's just a matter of what you're using in your house.
Our foreign nationals where blackouts are an occurrence in a lot of these countries. Are you having issues at all related to what you're saying?
Yes, faculty were having trouble getting into their audio, troubleshooting things that happened. So WebEx was a little bit tricky. Between the hours of 11 and 1:30 seemed to be a high volume time where a lot of classes are online. So the audio could be a little tricky, or some students had trouble getting, logging on. We're just trying to give some troubleshooting tips of, call in. It works a lot better sometimes if there's problems. We're really monitoring those high volume times on our end, try to help faculty get through it.
Your student or you could log into whatever service you're using, use the video on the service, but sometimes when there's a problem, it's with the audio. So you can also call in so people can see you visually through the online system and then hear you talking through your cell phone or your landline. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. A lot of faculty who requested what we're calling a WebEx driver to sit in. So I'm a WebEx driver in some classes where I sit in on the class, and through the chat, I'm helping students troubleshoot and work through so the faculty member doesn't have to worry about it. Seems to be a relief for the faculty, especially some that are using this for the first time. They feel better knowing that someone's online that can help with the students in case anything happens or goes wrong.
I want you to speak to your colleagues at other schools that are now getting into troubleshooting. What are some things that you would say have worked for you?
We have a lot of, how-to troubleshooting documents for faculty and for staff. We have so many WebEx drivers that have volunteered, staff and students who have a campus job, but campus job, they don't have a lot of work anymore. So we've done a lot of training for those. Recording is very, very important, even from a learning standpoint for students who need accommodations. One of the things that WebEx does nicely is when you record a session, after the recording is over, it transcribes it and does closed captioning. So those recordings that are posted for students who couldn't get in, or students who have accommodations, or for a student just to review the content, it does a nice job of all of the transcripts for students. The importance of just recording any online session and posting it to a learning management system. I think the students feel a little bit better if they have trouble and they just can't get to the class online, that they can at least know they can go back and review all the content.
Most often I get this issue coming up with faculty. Most often I get this issue coming up with students.
For faculty members, it's really how to share content and how to record. As far as troubleshooting, sometimes the audio, sometimes send the message, WebEx isn't working or goes down, and let students know that you're going to be posting on campus. From the student side, one thing to remember, and I think I reminded a lot of faculty of this, especially for the undergrad students, this is also new to them. They have never joined an online class. I had some students ask, what is WebEx? They weren't sure what it is. My own son asked, what's Zoom? I don't even know what that is, Mom. They're not really sure. They use technology, but nothing like this. So this is all very new. And for the students, they get a little stressed out when they're in a course session and they can't hear, or they can't speak, or the audio's not working, and so on. So it's just kind of soothing them and saying, okay, well, you know what? Try all these things, and if you can't get it to work, then just email your faculty member and say, I tried everything, but I just couldn't get it to work when I was trying to join the class. And then I think that's very helpful to kind of ease the stress for the students to know that it's okay, that we all have a good understanding that this is new for you, and we'll get through it. And then one other thing that I want to add that I've told both faculty and students is it may run smoothly the first time, the second time, but the third time it might not run as smoothly, or it might not run smoothly the first time, but the second or third time it might run great. This is technology. I've been working in technology long enough to say that there's a 99% chance it's going to work great, but there's a 1% that it might not, and that it's okay. It's going to be fine. There's ways to get this content if using WebEx or Zoom does not work.
That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an inspiring minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Hacks. If I'm an educator short on time and low on patience, what are the can't-miss tips I need to know before I move quickly into the virtual world? What are techniques that work really well? That's what today's episode is all about. Think about 3 activities that you're going to do over the course of a 90-minute online course. I've taught courses that have been 3 hours, and I've had to come up with 3 to 5 different things we're going to do over the course of that class. And it's doable. And when you do a class and you organize it and you plan it, it goes fast. And you want to overplan activity, not underplan. I want as many ways as possible to hear from the students. You want to learn from your students. You want the students to understand that their voices are important. And if you have a class of 20 or 30, they have different backgrounds. They're going to take the same material that you're talking about and then interpret it in a very different way from you and from each other, which will make the class a richer experience. If you're a coach, you have a number of plays that you have written out on a sheet before a game. And depending on what the situation is, you pull out one of those plays. Think about the activity that you have in your class as a way that you could fill the time in an interactive and dynamic way. Video, audio, images, discussions. Start the class with some things in the news related to my class as a way of having a discussion. There's a ton of great podcast content out there that's relevant to what you're teaching. Assign a couple of podcasts to your students before they come to class, just like an assigned reading. So I may have an assigned reading, an article, chapter in a book, but I also may have a podcast or 2. And it could be that you have a small excerpt from a podcast. Could be 5 minutes, could be 6 minutes, could be 30 minutes. But apply the content to your class. So you may have a video, YouTube video. You may have a documentary. There's a lot of great content out there. Leverage a blog. So if your course has an online blog on the platform that you're using, I give them a assigned reading, and then I also have questions. And in those questions, I'll say on the syllabus, okay, this assigned reading, answer one of these 3 questions in the form of a blog. Blog has requirements, like I teach them how to find a digital image that is restriction free. I teach them how to actually set that up on the course. I've showed them some skills that they can use. They're learning writing, but they're also learning how to take digital images and curate the images, captions, how to create hot links, have them link to other blogs that have great content, video to have great content, teaching students how to create a podcast. I give them an assigned reading, and then I ask them to answer a question, but do it in the form of actually a podcast. Learning the content, but I'm also giving them skills so that they have multiple mediums to actually respond to an answer to the question. So again, that's an example of what I mean of dynamic. PowerPoint slides. Share with them nothing but images. As we know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Sometimes you might want to just come up with 4 or 5 images that are related to the discussion you're going to have today and just use those. You can bring in guest speakers. It's very easy to do that. Use Skype or Zoom or some other technology, or even an audio. You could interview a person, and then after you interview them, again, you've done it in advance of the class, and then you take that content and you share it, upload it to your site so your students can listen to it. Or you can say, all right, we're going to take a couple minutes now. We're going to go on break. When we come back, we are going to have a speaker. You could either share that video, or you could have the speaker call in. As long as you have the URL to get into the course, you could have any visitor that you want. That's one of the things I do as an author. You could pay for me to come speak, and it's going to cost this amount of money, or I can save you a whole lot more money by me Skyping into your course, and I'll do the same thing for X, Y, and Z. It's going to be a lot more course effective for the people inviting me, and also for me. I don't have to get on a plane and get someplace. You can invite speakers coming in on a regular basis. And a lot of folks are sitting at home. They probably would love to have a stimulating conversation with the students in your class and with you.
Instead of doing an online session this week, can you give me some other tools that I can use within Canvas that can do just as good of a job?
Technology specialist Lisa Cohen.
One suggestion is even using another tool that we have called Panopto to record the lecture and then put the lecture in Canvas. Another option I've used before to faculty is just run your own WebEx session and record it and then post that. You don't have to have students online to do that.
Interviews with students. In my regular teaching, whether it's online or live, every class I spend about 10 minutes and I interview each student. And I have a set of basic questions. They're interviews to get to know the student, but basic things to know about that background. And it helps the students get to know one another. So it's not too late, even if you're jumping right into the middle of a class, you had to transition from a live class to now online. It's a great thing to do. And at the end of interviewing each of the students, I say, well, you all like to interview me? And they all jump on that opportunity. It's 10 minutes of a online course that may be 90 minutes that you take each class to do that. The students look forward to it and they get to know each other. And it changes up things. That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Isolation. If you're used to in-person interaction, won't it get lonely? How can educators deal with the loss of the on-campus environment? How can they get enthused and inspired? Advice from people who research and write about habits, peak performance, and then those in the behavioral health field who have weighed in since the start of the coronavirus. I've taken information from these 3 fields and I've incorporated them into my life, and I'll share some of the things I'm doing and I think are working well. So number 1, when you're working at home especially, you need to have a routine. You need to have a time when you actually schedule time to get up, a schedule time to work out, a schedule time for your meals, and get dressed. Now, I'm not talking about dress from your waist up because you're going to be on camera, but psychologically, when you put on certain clothes, it says, it's showtime, folks. It's important that you eat well, that you exercise, and that you maintain communication with friends and loved ones. Picking up the phone, calling people, checking in with people. Think about some of the support groups that you could tap into. There are many different support groups that people are doing virtually. Why not tap into those? I think those are great ways for you to feel involved and not isolated. terms of being inspired, I definitely see the experience of teaching online, like theater or playing sports. So I get fired up like that. I've also had the experience of being on local and national news shows or outlets. The only people you see when you walk into the studio is usually the engineer and the host. But you also realize in your mind that your voice is about to go out across the country, across the world. So it does get you in a mental state to be fired up and inspired. I challenge you to do the same thing with getting ready to teach online. That's how I treat it. I mean, at my house, I have a studio. I have one upstairs, I have one downstairs, depending on if people are getting really loud and stuff like that in my house. So if they're getting loud upstairs, I go use the downstairs. Those are my studios. And when I step into there, I'm acting like I'm going into a station to do an interview. It does keep me inspired, knowing that people are depending on me to deliver content and then do it in a way that inspires them. So that, I think, will help you, for you to realize the obligation you have to your students and to see it as not just you, that there's a larger world out there. The feeling of isolation you can deal with if you prepare your mind. So we talk about this in a little bit on the episode of mindset. The isolation is part of the mindset. So do what you can to maintain contact with friends and family. Realize that your studio at home is going to be beaming a signal to around the country, around the world. And many of you, just like I have as a professor, many of my students are in different continents of the world. So when I take that on, it inspires me to bring my best to the table, and in that process, inspire my students to also bring their best. If you know you're going to be teaching a 3-hour class or 90-minute class at a certain time, get out and get some fresh air, get some sunlight. Go for a walk, go for a bike ride, take advantage of nature. So I want to make sure I'm in the best mental framework before I teach. Take a break halfway through. It's a 90-minute class, or in my case, I've taught 3-hour classes. We take about 15 minutes to take a break. During that 15-minute break, often I would literally leave the studio where I was teaching and I'd go for a walk. If you're teaching at home, take a break, go interact with your family, go have a cup of tea. Just keep your eye on the clock, give yourself a timer, making sure that you have time to have conversations with loved ones. Make sure you also have a plan to unwind when the class is over. I know when I teach, when my wife teaches, we're typically kind of wiped out. Find something that's going to rejuvenate you as soon as the class is over. Think about a post-class plan so that you won't feel so isolated and you have an opportunity to rejuvenate yourself. That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more. Welcome to the Online Teaching Survival Guide, an Inspiring Minds at Harvard Business Publishing 7-part series. I'm your host, Dr. Fred Opie, a professor of history and foodways with more than 2 decades of teaching experience and more than 5 years of experience teaching online. This series will cover 7 subjects: mindsets, mistakes, students, technology, hacks, isolation, and perspectives. In each of the episodes, we will unpack these topics, provide examples, best practices, and share advice. Sit back, relax, and get prepared to be the best you can online as a teacher, administrator, or student. Perspectives. Let's end this 7-part series on a positive note. In what way can online teaching benefit your students? What feedback have students provided? How do you know that you're really connecting with your students in an online world? my favorite things as a faculty member is to see on the face of my students an aha moment. So one of the things that I do when I'm teaching online is I require that the students keep their video on. Or if it's a situation where we don't need it on, I'll say, all right, you may turn it on or you may put yourself on mute or whatever. I really am reading the faces of my students. That lets me know when I'm connecting with my students. In what ways can online teaching benefit your students? It can prepare them for job interviews. When they are doing interviews for internships or jobs, usually the first couple layers of the process is done online. So if you can teach the students how to be digitally literate, it's going to really help them. I have a research assistant. We meet each week online on Google Hangouts. If you can teach them how to feel comfortable online in a professional scenario, I think that's a good thing. I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to learn this early on. As an undergrad, we had these mini courses between first and second semester. I loved taking them as a student. And I taught a course for many years between first and second semester. It was great for those students who were short a couple courses to graduate and they needed to catch up. And it gave me an opportunity to meet my course load requirement as a faculty member in a way that worked really well. What if you had the opportunity to teach a course online and you could negotiate with your department chair or the dean of your school to teach, one of your courses? So you teach one live or you teach, I'd like to do them online. It gives you flexibility. When the weather is bad, it gives you flexibility. If you have a situation with childcare and you're healthy, but your child needs to be home, now you have an opportunity to continue to teach your course, but teach it online. It just gives you options. It also helps you if you are traveling to a conference and now you're able to actually record your information and provide the content so it's online so your students don't miss a beat. It gives you the ability to take the best content that you taught online for one course and or semester, take that content and put it online for the course you're teaching now. So rather than me recreate the same thing over and over again, I say, for the next class, we will not be meeting live. The content is available online and everything you need is there. But I will be having office hours. I think it's so cool too to be teaching here in Massachusetts, yet I have a student which, is in Asia or is in Africa or is in Europe. It's a really cool thing to be able to do that.
I had the opportunity to teach a lot of STEM classes, so science, technology, engineering, and math.
Dr. Heiss Gibson.
Undergraduate and graduate mathematics courses from calculus to math modeling to statistics.
How long did it take you to get your sea legs when you first started teaching online using a streaming service like WebEx?
Actually, only a few weeks. Like anything, it just takes practice. But it's very intuitive, very easy to engage with.
What's something you thought about teaching online that after you did it, you realized you had the perception all wrong?
Mathematics, although it's very easy to do problems, it's more challenging to understand an individual's thought process when solving mathematical problems. So you really do need some kind of interaction in mathematics, because although we may get to the same answer, our approaches are very different, and it really takes engaging with a student to understand how that individual learner processing a mathematical process in a way to arrive at their solution that is hard to get just virtual through a Blackboard, Canvas, or WebEx platform. You really need to look at the individual and understand what they're doing. A virtual online component and a web video interface to allow for that human interaction that really motivates learning.
When I taught online, we had a smart board, which was a regular dry erase board that was connected to the WebEx system. So I could take a marker or a pen that they had with it, one of these pins for an iPad or something like that, and I could draw circles, whatever. And like one of the things too that I love about some of the interaction is that I can give my students the screen in which they now could draw on that virtual board and show me how they're going to do a problem or work on a problem. Did you have that experience at all?
Early on, I did not, and now the ability to link an iPad with a pen to your computer and then share the screen provides that functionality, along with touch screens on laptops or surfaces that you can write on in a way that provides the opportunity to explain a concept, write like a chalkboard that's real-time visual, and with online teaching, the ability to now record what you just did. And so that provides the repetition that we know as educators is beneficial to students to have, I would say, a three-touch model. So you may hear it, you may see it, you may read on your own, and then you may do something. Any of those combination of threes will provide a stickiness to the material in a way that we know benefits learning. Functionality now allows for that chalkboard, smartboard experience that you used to have to be in a classroom for.
That is Dr. Heiss Gibson. What you've shared is going to be of great help to many people. So I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
And no problem, Fred. Thanks for asking. As we transition into this new normal, I think a lot of us will be leveraging online learning in ways we couldn't have imagined. And I think this is going to be beneficial for the educational space.
That's it for this edition of HBP's Online Teaching Survival Guide. Take a look at our show notes for related links, bios, and more.